Gentlemen, you ever been in a situation where you have a little bit of credit card debt or a little bit of debt that you can't pay, or you've moved and it didn't follow you, and all of a sudden the debt collectors are calling you, and they are the rudest people in the world. They will say the most unbelievable things, and they bully you into somehow making you pay for them. Well, that's just part of this story in this new book by our next guest, Jake Halpern. The book is called Bad Paper, Chasing Debt from Wall Street to the Underworld. Jake Halpern, welcome to Big 550, KTRS here in St. Louis.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
So what did you do? You went and found the origin of this practice?
Yeah, so what happens is I start with this story of this woman who lives down in the Southwest, and she gets called to pay a Washington Mutual debt for $2,700. And she wants to pay it, and she pays this debt off, and yet it never pops up on her credit report, and she never gets a receipt for it. And it's because she didn't pay the people that own the debt. She paid the people that stole the debt. And what happens here, just to give you some context, is when the banks can't collect on debts, they sell off consumers' information for pennies on the dollar in the form of spreadsheets, and this just gets stolen. And the guy that owns the debt realizes it's been stolen, and he then hires or gets a former armed robber to pack a car full of guys with guns to go and retrieve it. This kind of craziness actually exists in this world.
You're saying that after the bank, so the bank has a group of people who haven't paid their debts.
Yes.
They sell it to somebody for pennies on the dollar, and then those people try and go and get some of the money back, right?
That's right, exactly. I mean, after you can't pay 180 days, the bank just sells this off, and sells off these spreadsheets to a debt buyer. Then they try to collect on it, and whatever they can't collect on that package of debt, they sell to someone else for even less than a penny on the dollar. And it kind of works its way down the debt food chain. And at the very bottom of the debt food chain, you have guys that are doing the kind of most aggressive illegal tactics, threatening with lawsuits and arrest and that kind of stuff.
How do you know the difference between a quote-unquote reputable debt collector and one that is stolen and is not the quote-unquote reputable? And I use reputable lightly, by the way.
Right. No, that's a million-dollar question, is that, when one thing is if anyone's telling you they're going to arrest you or take your kids away, I mean, that's just blatantly illegal, and that should set off alarm bells. But I think the first thing I would do if I ever got a call from one of these guys is I would go on the Better Business Bureau, and I would go to the CFPB website, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau website, and I would look to see if the name of this operation rings off all these folks who are saying I paid and got nothing. Because you cannot assume that just because someone has your address and your Social Security number and the intimate details of your bank account that they, in fact, own your debt or the amounts they're asking for is accurate.
How much money are we talking about here with bad debt?
About, the banks selling off, billions of dollars. I mean, in the story that I follow alone, to give you a sense, one guy, one lone banker, he buys $1.5 billion worth of debt. He spends about $14 million, so for a few pennies on the dollar. And there are thousands of guys like him buying billions of dollars worth of this debt and trying to collect on it. And if they can collect even 30% of the face value of this debt, they can make a fortune.
I've always been told, Jake Halpern, the book is called Bad Paper, Chasing Debt from Wall Street to the Underworld, that in a situation like this, if they say you owe $100, you can say, hey, you know what, I'll give you $5, leave me alone, and chances are they'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a crazy thing. You would think that, I mean, it's not like, I would not have guessed that it's like buying a used car where you can kind of haggle with these guys. But that's right. You can absolutely haggle with them because even if you're paying $5, they're still making money on it. I mean, the thing I would just say is before I even paid $5, I would want to know that these guys really own the debt. Because, again, in the story that I follow, the debt gets stolen. And, that's what makes the banker called the former bank robber to kind of enforce a vigilante justice.
Jake, you posed as a debt collector, but you weren't that good, were you?
No, I was at this agency that was actually owned by this former armed robber, and he was actually, amazingly, he was doing a very above-board operation. And I was trying to get a sense for how they collected, and the guy said, you've got to try this. This is the only way you're going to understand it. So I tried, I did my best. First of all, it's a terrible job to be calling poor people and or middle-class people that are struggling, trying to collect the bills from them. And at the end of the day, I told him, I said, I stink at this. And he said, hey, man, you're just not hungry enough. If you were desperate enough, you would say what had to be said.
Like what, though?
Yeah,
like threatening people?
Yeah, I don't know. Look, I wouldn't threaten, and these guys weren't threatening, but I think what he was saying was there are plenty of guys who do threaten, who have no qualms about it. But I think what he was saying in this particular case was you would get better at the legal hustle, and that's kind of what this is. It's a legal hustle.
How much money does the debt collector calling you and badgering you, what's the percentage of money they get off of the money they collect?
Well, when they buy it for pennies on the dollar, pretty much everything they can collect above and beyond what they paid for it is profit. I mean, the overhead is fairly small. You have to rent an office. You got to hire some collectors at $12 an hour. You got to maybe pay for some software. But beyond that, it's profit, and that's why when I look in the book, I go to Buffalo, which is where I'm from, and where a lot of this activity is centered. I mean, I see all these guys who used to be drug dealers, and they're giving up on drugs, and they're saying, this is a much better hustle. The penalties are less. Even if you get busted for doing something wrong, you're not going to have to face the same jail time. And the startup is easy because all you need to do is buy some paper, which is what they call the debt, have some computers, and hire a few kids to make calls.
Wow. The book is called Bad Paper, Chasing Debt from Wall Street to the Underworld. Jake Halpern pulling the covers off of a very seedy underworld. Jake, great job. Thanks for checking in.
Hey, guys, thanks.
Bad Paper, Jake Halpern. Really interesting story.
Gosh.